We just received a massive admission by the ATF and the new director that completely alters the legal landscape for millions of Americans. Recently, the ATF officially proposed some sweeping rule changes and intends to roll back some of the Biden-era Second Amendment restrictions. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a total victory for constitutional rights in the Second Amendment going forward, and maybe a sign that there's going to be some major, multi-year two-way changes, and then maybe some of these two-way conflicts and litigations that have been going on about some of these Biden-era rules will now finally be over. But if you look past some of the language and dive directly in to the newly released regulatory text and some of these statements by the ATF director, we can see that there are still some massive problems. Even while the agency is moving to erase its own prior rules, they are quietly attempting to preserve an alarming amount of open-ended authority. This sudden shift goes directly to the heart of a major remaining lawsuit, and it raises a critical question. Does this new ATF move actually settle the dispute, or does it prove exactly why this remaining lawsuit still matters and really matters more than ever? Now, before we jump into what the ATF is doing, if you like this type of content and you want to support the channel, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss any of this information. Now, to understand what is happening here, we have to look at how we kind of got into this mess. This entire nationwide fight originally started when the Biden administration issued its highly controversial 2023 ATF pistol brace rule. That regulation attempted to instantly reclassify millions of brace pistols as SBRs, forcing them under the very strict guidelines of the NFA. The ATF set up a massive system of factoring criteria, looking at things like total weight, length, surface area, and marketing layout. Overnight, millions of Americans were turned into potential felons. This immediately triggered multiple lawsuits across the country, culminating in one of the major rulings by a judge, Judge Reed O'Connor in the Northern District of Texas, in a case called Mock versus Garland. The judge in this case handed the government a crushing defeat by issuing a nationwide vacatur of that Biden rule, and he concluded that the ATF completely exceeded its authority and violated the Administrative Procedures Act. Now, seeing how quickly your legal status can hang in the balance based on changing regulatory text really highlights a reality for every single one of us that we have to face, and it's that you cannot leave your personal defense up to simple chance. You need elite unconditional courtroom protections, and that is why I am proud to partner with attorneys on retainer. Unlike typical insurance-backed concealed carry programs that contain some massive exclusions or may drop your coverage entirely because maybe you have a prohibited item, AOR is not doing any of that. AOR is backed by a real aggressive national defense law firm that will protect you regardless. They put actual dedicated trial attorneys in the courtroom on your side to fight for your freedom as long as you have a valid argument of self-defense. And right now they're giving my viewers a premium opportunity to lock in this type of protection. You can use the custom code ARMSCHOLAR at checkout to get $50 off of your individual sign-up fee or $25 off of your family fee. Now, following this devastating nationwide vacatur of the ATF's prior rule, the ATF has officially proposed removing that 2023 brace rule completely and just getting it off the books. The broad factoring criteria system is being abandoned, and the ATF text explicitly states that individuals can resume purchasing firearms with attached stabilizing braces without registration, provided the firearm is not intended to be fired from the shoulder. In essence, the current ATF is signaling that it wants to go back to the pre-Biden era brace rules, so they want to go to what essentially was in place prior to that Biden rule. But here's where the concerns begin. In a recent interview, the ATF director openly indicated that despite pulling back this rule, the agency still may view some of these braced pistols as potentially illegal SBRs. He explicitly noted that while the ATF isn't actively hunting down or searching for everyday Americans possessing these items, there is still the potential that people may be subject to the NFA on a case-by-case basis. According to the director, if an individual happens to come into contact with law enforcement for any reason, or maybe if a prosecutor decides to go after you, that firearm could be reviewed by the ATF on a case-by-case basis and may still be determined to be an SBR. This means that the underlying enforcement threat hasn't completely gone away. It has simply just kind of gone underground. The ATF has abandoned a very clear written framework and reverted back to the pure, kind of unelaborated statutory language that existed before, claiming that they still have the vague statutory textual authority to reclassify or classify your brace pistols as unregistered NFA items on that case-by-case basis. And that is exactly why the major remaining lawsuit brought by GOA in the state of Texas is now more important than ever, and really is one of the most important cases still dealing with this brace issue. GOA isn't just attacking the Biden-era brace rule, they're going after the ATF's underlying legal theory. GOA is fighting to ensure that the federal government cannot use vague statutory language to execute kind of surprise case-by-case criminal enforcement against Americans. In fact, in this case, the DOJ has already admitted to the court in filings that erasing the rule does not eliminate their ability to enforce the underlying statutory text. They told the court point blank that the NFA and GCA still apply and that the rule itself carried no independent criminal penalty. So essentially they're saying we didn't even need the rule on brace pistols. We could have done this just under the pure text of the NFA. So in other words, what we're looking at is not a total surrender by the ATF on this issue. Instead, this is simply reverting back to the old standards. They lost badly in the lower courts, faced a devastating nationwide vacatur of the rule, and realized that this aggressive framework could simply not survive. So now they are backing away from this high-profile kind of Biden-era, rulemaking and trying to bypass these courts while quietly actually maintaining an open-ended, vague authority to scrutinize your property on a case-by-case basis. Now, because this ATF new rule currently is simply just a proposed rule, it must still go through the formal administrative process, including public comments and potentially revisions. But as this unfolds, the GOA case kind of remains the last line of defense on this topic. It may ultimately determine once and for all whether the ATF can continue to regulate or criminalize brace pistols under the statute alone without any clear standards. And really, in this GOA case, the question becomes, is that issue going to outlive the brace rule itself? Currently, the GOA case is waiting for a ruling by the court to determine if the case is moot or if the broader enforcement issue by the ATF against brace pistols still needs to be resolved by the court. It will also be interesting to see if the plaintiffs here in this GOA case submit these new statements made by the ATF director as proof to the court that what they've been warning about, what they've been talking about and really arguing all along in this case is actually, what is happening and is actually currently the ATF's position. But in general, the ATF is attempting a massive regulatory retreat, but the foundational fight over your constitutional rights is still very much alive and may be actually flushed out in this lawsuit. As the GOA case advances and this proposed rule moves forward, I will bring updates to you guys, but this is just another statement made by the ATF director clarifying that there may still be SBR enforcement against brace pistols on a case-by-case basis. And that, of course, is clearing up, some of these questions that he says that they're not actively going after anybody, but there is still potential that someone could get jammed up. And that is a concern for a lot of people. So as we get more information, as this unravels more, I will let you guys know. Make sure if you like this video to hit the like button, drop your thoughts down below on what the ATF is currently doing, those statements on the case-by-case enforcement mechanism of this issue, and just let me know your thoughts down below. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.